All right, so we made it to the end of DS9. We're done with it. It's over. We watched, or at least I watched 76 episodes of this. Clay, you did more than half of those by far. And now we're at the end of it. We're going to do a little series wrap-up, I think will be a good way to close this thing out. And we'll see how it goes from there. But Clay, first of all, how are you?
I'm good. I'm for another $200 in the Patreon, we'll go back and I'll watch all the episodes I didn't watch.
Yeah, you obviously started it full time in the fourth season, and you saw everything I think but 2 episodes from the fourth season on. So it was a different experience. Do you want to get into that? Like how did it compare to you in TNG versus a DS9 kind of like difference when it was all over? Did it feel? I think we briefly touched on that, but you only sort of got into TNG on like a semi-regular guest thing where DS9 was like a consistent 2-a-week thing. Was it like a gym experience where you started getting in shape in terms of recognizing the episodes or something like that, or does it feel exactly the same?
It feels more or less the same. I think it's a weird. It's kind of weird how it all shakes out because I with the way that Deep Space Nine is structured, I feel like you become more comfortable with the characters and seeing how they change and everything and blah, 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 blah. But with TNG, the characters are so static for the most part that I feel like you just settle into that quicker.
Yeah.
And so when you get to the end of TNG, I feel like I know the characters just as well as I did in Deep Space Nine, even though I watched like
a quarter of the episodes maybe.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll before we go to break, I'll ask you a question here, and then we'll get into it after the music break. So, which of these is the better series, DS9 or TNG? We'll
start some fights.
We'll give Clay some time to think about it. We'll play some music, and we'll be right back.
The real answer is the original series, obviously.
The answer is they're all equal. Here's the music.
Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints, just people.
I think as we get into talking about wrapping up DS9 and everything, it's kind of a silly, unfair question because I think the series are very different from each other. But do you think that one? I think that whether or not how you answer that question, or whether or not TNG or DS9 is the superior series, kind of comes down to, I think it's a good way to define what you look for in a TV show in a lot of ways and what you think is important for a TV show to do. So I don't know if you have an actual answer to that question or if you just wanted to spin it off into some kind of political answer where you don't really answer and then go off into something else. You're free to take it however you want. But do you kind of understand what I mean when I'm asking? I think that DS9, if anything, my takeaway here is that I think DS9 in the fandom is both underrated and overrated at the same time. Yeah. You'd agree with that?
I would. Because my political answer is, we don't need to, it's not which series is better. It's all about, whether or not we have clean drinking water in this country. Isn't that something we can all agree on?
The actual political answer is you blame me for not getting the job done to explain to you which series is better, and then we go off on that. Yeah.
Yes. Just look at his Patreon. He's taking donors. He's taking donations from big money corporations, and I'm over here watching these episodes by myself in my own home for you.
Hungry.
No, I think it's unfair, but I think that the only way that you can really kind of look at these and compare them is you have to look at the best of the best from each series, because the one thing I've learned doing both of these shows is there is a shocking number of not very good episodes across all 7 seasons of both series. And I think if you really wanted to get into the trenches about which one is better, you can only really compare them at their best. That being said, I think their bests are different. So, yeah, I think it comes down to what you said. It's what you're looking for out of a television show. because obviously Deep Space Nine at its best is more. I hate keeping defaulting to it's serialized to be the thing that makes it different, because it's not. It's like I'm tired of saying that.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what else to say though, because it's like I feel like Deep Space Nine at its best takes the idea of Star Trek and kind of like really kind of tries to break it and see how far it can bend, and then it usually bounces back and reaffirms the idea and the core of Starfleet and all that kind of shit.
It's a more provocative
TNG,
series.
Yeah, it's a more provocative series. TNG at its best is great high concept sci-fi.
Yep.
It's got, okay, these are the characters, these characters, they're going to be in this situation this week, and you go, oh, that's a cool situation. I wonder how they're going to react to that situation.
Yeah.
Then they go through it, and then it's a nice, up and down story, thrill ride, whatever. And at the end, you go, that was a great episode of TV. That was a great story. Deep Space Nine is a little bit more introspective, I think.
Yeah. I was trying to break down what I think the difference between the two of them are. And I do think there's it feels funny discussing it, because on its face, it's kind of obvious what the difference is between the two series, especially after we've watched so many of them. But I think that, to me, what really comes back as the distinct difference between the two kind of ties into serialization, but not at the same time, where when TNG made a mistake, it was only confined to an episode. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was the biggest mistake you could say TNG would make would be like, well, they didn't execute
Wesley
that
Crusher.
idea. What's that?
Wesley Crusher.
Wesley Crusher. That's true. You've actually broken my argument. I think TNG, you could say, doesn't really like a mistake on TNG's level is they carry over an idea, or they don't execute on an idea, or the idea itself is not particularly good from the get-go. But 45 minutes later, the idea is gone, and the mistake has been kind of wiped away.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to
go... The people
of
Angel 1, Wes, will never be forgotten.
Right. You might not forget them, but they're not on the DVD, the next track of the DVD or something.
Right, yeah.
But DS9 is different, and this sounds more negative than it is, but I think this is actually ties into the positives of the show. So I'm going to list a few things here, Clay, that I consider mistakes that DS9 has done over the course of 7 years. The Ferengi storylines, the Mirror Universe, Vic Fontaine's oversaturation, the O'Brien family, Esri Dax, the Prophet storyline, Kira and Odo in a relationship, Kira's dating life in general, Bareil from Bajor, the Bajoran religion, Kira moving in with the O'Briens. I don't even know if you remember that happened.
You're just summarizing the series at this point.
Kai Wynn, the Pah-wraiths, and Sisko being divine as a half-prophet person. So the thing that sticks out to me is that DS9 made a tremendous amount of mistakes, I think, over the course of its series, like more than you would expect a really super well-written show to do. But that's not to say that they didn't do things well. But what really sticks out to me is the number of times that they had a bad idea and they were kind of stuck with it for a little bit of time, and you had to deal with it over an extended period. And it's really interesting that when you do a show that's 26 episodes over 7 seasons and you have some mistakes in it, it feels like it's a lot of the material is actually not very good, even if there is a lot of great material. TNG, to me, doesn't have that kind of memory in my head when I think about it. I don't think about the bad plot lines. I think about bad episodes, but that seems distinct from a bad plot line.
Yeah, and I think that's a big difference when you get into these episodic and serialized shows, is because you end up thinking that way. You don't think of, oh man, remember that episode where the Enterprise keeps blowing up? That episode's so cool. What you think of is, man, remember how Kira and Odo got together and that was a thing for like 3 seasons? That could have done without that. You end up remembering different things. So in place of, oh, remember that episode, it's, oh, remember that plot line.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you end up in the minus side with a plot line, it's going to be something that stands out and gets remembered the way a bad episode gets remembered.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, What's your major takeaway of this series? I guess if you want time to think about it, I think mine would just be that it was the major takeaway, I guess, is like just the general sense that it was truly a kind of different take on Star Trek than what TNG did, where TNG was mostly just an evolution of what TOS was doing, and it just kind of repeated it, but it made version 2.0, and it became better because of that, and it was more modern and everything. DS9, like, what sticks out to me is just the wealth of the universe that they created within the single series. I mean, it's like outside of the main cast members, just the guest cast here is just this another list for you, but it's like Keiko O'Brien, Rom, Nog, Garrick, Lita, Ducat, Cassidy Yates, Winadami, Luxana Troy, Morn, Martok, Michael Eddington, Damar, Gowron, Barile, Opaka, Brunt, Weyoun, Tor Zayal, Female Changeling, William Ross, Vic Fontaine, Shakar, Zek, Ishka, Joe Sisko. There's just so many characters that, like, I don't think TNG even filled 10 forward with that many characters when they were shooting something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think what Deep Space Nine really does, because, you know, like you said, TNG is more or less a copy of, structurally anyway, or in concept, a copy of the original series. And I think they either realized, if they didn't realize it at the conception of the show, they realized it fairly quickly that you just can't keep doing that. And which is why they ended up getting away from the TNG style episode structure, even though it seems like it was conceived with that in mind, where it's like, oh yeah, this will be the place where instead of the ship going somewhere, people will come to the ship.
Yes.
But they found out quickly that didn't work, and so they had to kind of evolve and adapt. And I think the biggest plus to the Star Trek universe writ large that Deep Space Nine contributes is that it really makes the universe or the galaxy or the quadrant or whatever you want to call it feel like it's alive. It feels like there's a mass of people and communities, a civilization, I guess. Whereas TNG kind of has like the Star Wars planet syndrome, where it's like, okay, we're going to go talk to the Romulans. They're over here. Now we're going to go talk to the Klingons, who are like way over here. It's like, oh, we're going to Tatooine. That's this planet. Now we're going to Hoth, which is this planet. And they never really cross over, but they're both out there and we got to go to them. Deep Space Nine acts more like the cantina, where it's where you get to see that this universe that's been created is populated by people who interact with each other, who have differing opinions. It makes Starfleet feel like more of a thing, because instead of it just being this concept that is coming from Picard or from some admiral to influence the plot point of an episode involving, like, mud farmers on some planet or some shit, it actually has a stake in what's happening and is involved, and you see how Starfleet affects different civilizations, and you've got people trying to come to this Federation, people trying to get out of the Federation. It really does a lot of great world building for the concept of Star Trek, more so I think than a lot of the other series.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I mean, even like Voyager, once you get past Deep Space Nine, Voyager kind of ends up, from what I remember anyway, ends up more towards TNG, where they're going to a lot of stuff, but they're so far out anyway that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, because it's not part of like the Starfleet or the Federation. It's all new
stuff. It's all brand new stuff. Yeah,
which is fine too, but it doesn't have that sort of. It doesn't solidify the concept, I think, the way that Deep Space Nine does.
Yeah, the other series feel like there's a lot of empty space in between things. Like you're literally hopping from planet to planet. TOS felt that way.
Which, I'll be honest with you, it could be a plus or a minus.
Yeah,
depending on how you view Star Trek as a concept. Because if your idea of Star Trek is space, the final frontier, who knows what we're going to find out there? Space is so vast. That is not what Deep Space Nine is. Deep Space Nine is like, well, the space station is like a 45-minute shuttle ride away from everything.
You think Discovery's bad? Wait till DS9 is right there in the middle of stuff. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know. Because this is probably, it sounds more like I'm critical of DS9, but what I sort of want to protect is that I think that what DS9 did was a good job of separating itself enough from TNG where I can't easily say that DS9 is a superior series to what TNG did, because I think that what TNG did is actually kind of a very impressive accomplishment in a way that DS9, like TNG is more of a perfection of a format than DS9 is this sort of experiment of a format. And DS9 in its experimentation made a tremendous amount of mistakes, I think, which is really kind of fascinating, and that it's like it still managed to be good at the same time as it was really trying to figure out how you're supposed to tell stories like this going forward. And I think that's the question of whether or not I think DS9 is overrated. I think DS9 is slightly overrated in the sense that I don't think people acknowledge how bad DS9 could be in some places.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, especially coming at it as someone who's never seen it before and hearing it talked of as this great, television cinematic achievement, I was, the thing that's is the cliche that people say is like, oh, well, once Worf shows up and once he shaves his head and stuff, that's when it's all full steam ahead. But when we got there, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for this. It's still kind of bad. It's better, but there's still stepping in dog shit 1 out of 5 times instead of 1 out of 3 times, I guess. So it's like, I think it is one of those things where it's like, if you really distill it down, I think we talked about this in the last episode, but it's like, if you took all 7 seasons and stripped away like 50% of it, I think you would have a fantastic show. And I'm not saying it's not fantastic, but I think that's the show that people think of.
Yes.
This 50% that is just really elevated. And
they're the opposite of what I'm thinking of, which are the mistakes. It's thinking of the pale moonlights. It's thinking of the occupation arc. It's thinking of those things. And a lot of the comments from people who have been watching with us this time are going, I didn't remember season 7 being so middling for a lot of this. Like, I didn't remember that all these bad episodes that happened here. You just kind of block them out.
Yeah, because you think of like the high points and you think of, the 10-episode arc at the end, which apparently everybody forgets is like 50% garbage. It's kind of like it's like the Guns N' Roses albums, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2.
Yeah.
If they had really put the edit to those things and came up with one album, that would have been like the best album they ever put out. But they decided to do 2 albums, so you get like 4 or 5 really great songs across like 12 to 15 tracks, and then the rest of them are kind of like middle to bad.
Yeah, same with the Clash's Sandinista. It's a 3-album release that had maybe 1 album worth of songs on it.
Yeah, sometimes you got to know when to strip it down. But obviously, in this case, you can't do that because it's a television show. But it is. Here's a question for you, because you're more familiar with both series than I am, at least on and how they work together and X, Y, and Z. What is it? Why do you think this series has overtaken TNG the way it has when people talk about Star Trek, as the one being like, oh, TNG's good, but Deep Space Nine is the shit. That's where it's at.
I think that I'd actually be curious to know, would you say that you think, before I answer, would you say that is a fandom conceit, or do you think that the general public would say that as kind of a matter of fact?
Well, I don't know if the general public knows what Deep Space Nine is.
Right. So we're talking about just a fandom thing.
Yeah. When you get into fan stuff, it's always like, I don't know if it's the idea of like, you've got your really popular, well-known thing, but the people who are in the know, the cool people,
the black sheep is cooler than the
it's where like Martin Scorsese movies, everybody loves Goodfellas, but I really like The King of Comedy, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Or is it like, is that what it is? Is it just a matter of if you're a real fan, you like Deep Space Nine, or I don't know, because don't perceive that as me thinking less of the show. I'm just interested as to why it has become this dark horse favorite, I guess.
I think I think there's probably two reasons for it. The first one is what you were talking about, which is that it is not the popular one, therefore it's kind of cool to like it more than the other stuff. So it is a dark horse where, and it's a dark horse because of the nature of what it does, which is that even if people don't want to sort of verbalize the fact that it's pushing against the Roddenberry thing, like the people who don't like DS9, who seem to be really into Star Trek, tend to, in my opinion, fetishize the Roddenberry universe, where they're like, the problem with DS9 is that it's too dark, and a better Star Trek series would actually come up with a way to defend Roddenberry's ideals by not criticizing them in a lot of ways. So DS9 doesn't do that. DS9 has a war story that I think is kind of people like that. Like, people like a war story and things. But I think the other thing that's maybe a more cynical take is that I think people over fetishize serialization in TV these days. And I think that I think there's a belief that making a serialized story is harder than doing an episodic show over and over again. And I don't know if that's true. I think that DS9 makes it seem difficult because they did not know what they were doing for so much of the time that
Discovery makes it look difficult too.
Discovery makes it look difficult too. But there's a lot of other non-Star Trek-y shows that are serialized that don't make it look so difficult to do. Like you'll have problems and everything, but I think that's pretty much it. Do you have a different opinion about why people like this show more than that? I think that's really, those are the major two reasons to me as to what it is. But I say that in the sense that if you gave me a task of, I'm on like the Harvard debate team and our topic is which of these series is better, I could go on either side, and I think I could make an effective case for why either one is superior to the other.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think you can. I think you can go either way with it. I do think it stands out because it is really, even across, if you're not considering Deep Discovery, just for the sake of argument, we're not. Well, you'll see what I mean in a minute. It is the one that doesn't. It's the outlier. Like across 5 series of television, it's the only one that's really changes the format, because Voyager kind of goes back to the old way, more or less. Yep.
Enterprise is just before. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine Enterprise is similar, that where it's more I've only watched like a couple episodes of Enterprise, but it feels to me like it's not really super serialized, and it's got more classic Star Trek feel to it. Is that the case?
It is. It's 4 seasons. The first 2 are not really serialized, and then they started to serialize things more later on. But it's sure. In general, it feels much more like a traditional. The ship is called the Enterprise. Like it's
right.
It's in that vein. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Deep Space Nine is the outlier that tries something different, and it succeeds at it for the most part, I guess. I think it succeeds at it. As far as what it's trying to do, I do think it succeeds at it more often than it doesn't.
It succeeds in soft serialization much better than it does in hard serialization.
Yeah, and just the concept of the stories that they're telling too. I think whether or not the stories themselves are a success, the fact that they are telling those kinds of stories is in and of itself a success, because it is changing the approach to the material in a way that still I feel like stands out from all the other series. So I can see why people are drawn to it. It's like when your favorite band does an acoustic album and you're like, actually, the acoustic album's really good, because usually they just play like shredding heavy metal guitars all the time. Deep Space Nine is the Led Zeppelin 3 of Star Trek.
Yeah, it's I'd agree with that. It's tough because we're so. I guess the difference in mentality is like we just finished DS9 and we've had 2+ years of being away from TNG for this time before when you start reconsidering it and everything like that. But I think it did do. What I mean by soft serialization is that when it wasn't trying to span an arc over multiple episodes, that was kind of like trying to continue a story for multiple episodes, more than a double episode, two-parter or whatever. It did a better job of building a universe, which is what I'm considering soft serialization, which is that you're coming back to things that you know and things that exist in this world, but you're not sort of telling the story continuously for a long period of time.
Sure.
The show is not very good at doing that. The final arc showed that, and even some of the occupation arc showed that they weren't really equipped to do that kind of thing. But just the depth of the guest cast that they made by the end of the show builds this world that really feels like it sits somewhere, as opposed to TNG, which is always on the run from something. It's always running away to the next story.
Yeah.
DS9 just kind of settles in that, and I think that in a lot of ways, I think that you could feel more at home with the DS9 TV show because it feels like a place that you can exist. And TNG... People like TNG because it's like the friendly work family that you can hang out with, but I feel like DS9 actually feels like a more like a real family to you.
And as far as guest cast goes, I mean, it's not even close between Deep Space Nine and TNG.
No,
because they
who's the best guest? Who's the best?
I was just going to say
star?
that they serve very different purposes though, because TNG it's like, bring this guy in for one episode. He's kind of wacky, huh? I guess we'll never see that guy again. Whereas Deep Space Nine, you're bringing these characters in to try and flesh them out and make them a character who now lives in this world.
Yeah.
As opposed to, a sexy candle ghost or a space Irish or...
I'm even thinking of, I'm just thinking of like recurring people like Guinan. Like Guinan's my best example of TNG doing a recurring character. The only ones I could think of would be Q, Gowron, Lursa Bator, I suppose. Like, there's not a lot of them.
Barclay?
Oh, Barclay. That's right. Yeah, Barclay would be there. Lore, I guess, would be one. None of those really excite me, though. Like, if you were to tell me that we were not going to do another TNG episode with Lore, I'd say, good. That's fine. I'll see you.
Yes. Yeah. Like, when you think about Lore and what he does or doesn't bring to the table, and then you think about, like, Garrick, it's not even close.
Yeah. No, it's... The guest stars of DS9, it's probably the weakness in the how they are executing his TV shows, because TNG has to bring in, as you say, a guest character has to come in and bring his guest star trait to that episode.
Yeah,
so
it's the definition of like the old style guest star.
Right. So the theme of your episode revolves around whatever that trait is of that person.
Yeah.
Where the DS9 guest cast can be brought into any story, and it feels natural that they would be there. And you still do the same thing where you kind of shade, like, Garrick's main purpose over the course of the series is to, when he pairs with another character, he kind of causes that Starfleet character or whatever to question what their foundational beliefs are and things, because he doesn't believe in any of that stuff. But that feels more thematically appropriate to the series than a mustache twirling double duplicate of Data comes along and has emotions. Like, that just it feels more campy and unbelievable.
I don't think they really get into this in TNG. I guess Guinan is probably the closest one, but it's on Deep Space Nine. You can have these guest stars who are not the focus of the story, and who are just like, if you are telling your story and then it's like, you know what, it would be great if in this episode Bashir talked to Garrick for like 5 minutes at the beginning. You could do that, whereas in TNG, if that happens, then that character is involved with the rest of the story.
Yes. Characters always stop by and stay a while in TNG.
Yeah.
They don't just exist on the ship. Yeah.
Guinan's the only one who doesn't really do that.
That's true.
But that's her purpose, though. That her purpose is to be there for someone to talk to. She unlike Garrick, who is there to interact with Bashir, but he's also there to be involved in Cardassian things. He's also there to just kind of be a smarmy prick to people sometimes. Yeah,
to play cat and mouse with Odo every once in a while.
Yeah, so the guest stars on Deep Space Nine are a lot. The bench is a lot deeper on Deep Space Nine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I'm going to be doing a 30 days of DS9 on social media. So it'll be the Twitter and the Instagram. So if you want to follow this, we'll do a couple of teasers here, but you can follow me on those two things and you'll see my picks for topics across a bunch of these. And I guess this is a good place as any to start, Clay. So I asked you to come up with your favorite guest star or a guest character or anything like that. You can either go first or I can go first, depending on what you prefer. So would you like the ball now or after me?
Sure, I'll go. Because I think the thing that gets funny with Deep Space Nine is the threshold of what counts as a guest star gets a little fuzzy. Because my first thought was Dukat, but Dukat is so prevalent that I don't even really think of him as a guest star.
Yeah.
I just kind of think of him as part of the story who's just not in every episode. Like I would consider
he's more of a main character than Jake in some ways.
I was just going to say, yeah, I would consider Jake more of a guest star than Dukat.
Yep.
So not counting Dukat, I think Garrick is probably my favorite guest star.
Okay. Yeah, we touched on that a little bit. I mean, what did you think that Garrick actually brings to this series in a way that's unique for him? Or what does he excel at?
He fills the role that I really enjoy, which is you've got a bunch of good guys, and then you have one bad guy who's defected to the good guys, who always ends up on the side of good, but you're never really sure whether or not he's going to screw you. I really like that character. I think it's a great addition, and I think given the story they were telling, his character was fantastic for the sort of almost post-Cold War spy sort of angle.
Yeah.
Where you've got, well, the war's over, what do spies do now? Do they lament the old ways? Do they keep killing people? Do they become tailors? He kind of lets you explore that stuff and gets you in to some back channel Cardassian stuff when you need him to. He's just he's a good utility character.
Yep.
As far as actors, though, I mean, Andrew Robinson is awesome. I think I don't know if you can really put anybody above Jeffrey Combs, because he plays like 3 different people sometimes in the same episode.
Yeah. He played, Brunt and Weyoun are the 2 big ones. He played a one-off character in one of the other episodes, the one where he pays Quark to get some nudes, for some nude photographs. He's that character. He's actually my pick, and Weyoun is my pick in a lot of ways, which is, I suppose, kind of not controversial. That's the wrong word for it, but like where I can see the Garrick pick and I can see the Dukat pick and everything like that. My argument would basically have been it would have been Dukat except for the last season and a half that we got of Dukat, unfortunately, which really, I think, knocks him down quite a bit. Weyoun is incredibly consistent, and I just think that Weyoun, I think the performance of having to nail Weyoun and what Combs did with Weyoun in his first appearance totally redefined what the Vorta are from that period forward. Like, the writers were like, oh, this is how we need to write these characters. What he did was, it's an incredibly difficult performance to play this sort of sleazy bureaucrat character, the sycophant character, and not have it come off as totally either cliche or just over the top campy. And Weyoun to me is just such a wonderful example of like this middle management character who is endlessly diplomatic, is very like kind to his enemies in a kind of sleazy, underhanded way, but is also a true believer of the founders and has like good conversations with Damar and Dukat and Sisko and Odo. And he's so wonderfully played by Combs, who just effortlessly inhabits that kind of a character that I think he's really unique in the show, where a lot of the other performances, not to say that he's not campy, but a lot of the other performances feel like performances in a way that Weyoun to me feels like an incredibly grounded character, and how like someone would really act if that was his role and responsibilities. And I really like him. I think he's good every time that he comes onto the show.
Counterpoint. Garrick never blinks, and that's very difficult to do. No, I know what you mean. I think I choose Garrick over Weyoun or Jeffrey Combs because I feel like, while all the stuff you're saying is true, I feel like Garrick just is more adaptable to different stories, which I like. Whereas Weyoun, you kind of know more or less what he's there for every time he shows up.
Yes,
which is not a bad thing, because I think he still nails it. But as far as characters go, yeah, I think Garrick is just a much more versatile character. And I would say I would agree though. I think probably the Weyoun performance is probably a bit more nuanced than the Garak performance, because Garak is fairly, he's not broad, but he's a little bit more over the top than Weyoun is.
I think if you replaced the actors in those two roles, Weyoun suffers way more than Garak does. Garak has this interesting writing behind him because his purpose and everything is kind of an interesting thing to do in this universe, where Weyoun is, I think, pure performance in a way.
Yes,
there's nothing really twisted about Weyoun in terms of dialogue or anything like that, but just the spin that Combs puts on him makes him such a interesting character when he's really just doing a lot of bureaucratic nonsense and praising the founders and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. He's definitely he definitely gets the Benicio del Toro award for making a lot out of nothing.
Yeah. But I think that Garak is certainly more thematically important to the series. Like if you were to pick a guest character that summed up DS9, I think Garak is the only way that you can really go with it. He serves that purpose well. But Dukat, the way to go off of that is Dukat's tough because I love Dukat pretty much all the way through post Waltz. Really, Covenant is almost fine too. That's the one that you actually kind of like, that one where he becomes the devout religious leader for the Bajorans.
Oh yeah, that was pretty good. I like that one.
But his final arc is so bad that it really knocks him down a little bit of a ways in my memory anyway. But it's too bad because I think Dukat is actually a really interesting character too.
Yeah, he's great. I think he's probably a better at least until they throw him off a cliff, literally. I think he's probably a more interestingly drawn character than any of the main characters. Maybe not any of them, but I find him in his situation and his actions and his motivations really interesting in a way that I don't find a lot of the main cast. Because I guess he's at a bit of an advantage because he's only there. He's not there all the time. But so when he is there, everything he does has a purpose and everything he does has a motivation behind it in a way that just Worf hanging out doesn't.
Right. O'Brien. Yeah, doesn't really always have something to do. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that because I guess that can bring us into, the next. Well, actually, do you have a least favorite guest star? I was trying to think of one, and it's a little bit harder.
Least
actually.
Favorite.
What's that?
I was just saying least favorite, huh?
Yeah, when I think of TNG, a least favorite guest star for me is Loxana pops in at my mind.
Yeah.
Q even pops into my mind sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to watch a Q episode. DS9 is a little bit different, and I had to think about it, but I think I know who mine is. Mine would be Bareil, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody with Vedic in front of their name can go take a hike.
Vedic, even when Kai Wynn is putting you to shame, but in
Bareil, the other dude, who's the other dude that she's in love with?
Shakar.
Oh, fuck that guy. Yeah. Any of those people, those characters suck.
And even then, it's not a Bareil sucks because he's just so boring. There's nothing fundamentally obnoxious about him, I don't think, or you get an episode with Bareil, not a Bareil episode. You don't really think that. You're just oh yeah, right, this guy's going to be in it for a while, and he doesn't make a lot of sense being there, and he's not very exciting to watch and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's just that's also a symptom of the Bajoran stuff not being super well cooked, I think.
Yep. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. We can move into we can just quickly sort of hash out a ranking of our main cast members here. There's 9 of them, and we'll start at the bottom, which I don't think has changed for you, Clay, because I don't think the final chapter really involved him much at all. But is O'Brien still your least favorite character, or the least well served out of all the characters on the show?
I think so. Yeah. I actually would on my list. I actually went by actors, not characters. But
sure. So you thought about them in terms of just their acting as opposed to their characterization.
Yeah, and performances and quality of performance and stuff.
No, so we'll have different lists, I guess. Then, yeah.
Going by performer, I would say both versions of Dax are at the bottom of my list.
Okay.
They never really totally got the hang of that character. She gets better in like the last season or so before they kill her off, but I think they go back to zero with Ezri, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I don't know the name of the woman who plays Ezri, but maybe she might have a bit of an advantage because they kind of have an idea of what they're doing when they bring her back. But even there, they never really dial that in, and she's in the series so much in that last season, yet they don't really feel like they know exactly why.
Or like, I guess maybe it's a slight difference, or like they don't have a good reason for her to be there so often, which is kind of the same thing, but also different. Like the low point of season 7 is the 3 Ezri episodes in a row. For some incomprehensible reason, they thought that was going to be a good way to go.
I still don't understand that. And it's not like, if you've recast Terry Farrell, if you've recast the role of Dax with like, I don't know, who's a big actress in 1999, Kate Winslet or something.
Lori Loughlin. Kate Winslet. You're going big. They landed. You bring
Laura Dern. You bring Laura Dern in to play Dax or something. Give her 3 episodes, sure. But as it stands, it's
Meryl Streep is the new Dax on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Yeah,
hell yeah. That would have been. I mean, I guess I'm not thinking about the actor specifically, but that would have been interesting too. If instead of putting the Dax symbiote into a younger, attractive woman, if they had picked like an older, more
seasoned actress,
world-wise character, I think overall she's at the bottom for me. And
so if you were to eliminate characters, you'd choose Dax over O'Brien going through this. If you were to recast the show and they say you had to cut one of these characters out,
if you put it that way, I would get rid of O'Brien because I think Dax has more potential. O'Brien is fine; he's serviceable. He fills roles that he needs to fill, but I don't think he has like. He's kind of topping out in this series, I think.
Yes. Yeah. My ranking for the bottom 3 would be O'Brien. Then I have Jake, and then I have the Daxes after that. I snuck Jake in there just because he doesn't really feel like a main cast member, so it's difficult to place him anywhere. He does have the Visitor, which is huge, and which is not Sirach Lofton for most of it. But I just feel that Jake is that low just because I think Jake serves an important purpose for Cisco. He's an important character to have around for Cisco to exist and to sort of make sense. But at the same time, he's not really. If you were to cut Jake, I don't think you lose that much over the course of the series.
No, I don't think so. And I mean, I think that's evident at how infrequently he shows up.
Would he be in one of your bottom 3? He's in so few episodes. It's surprising.
Yeah, I actually, when I was thinking of people, he didn't even pop in my head. Yeah, I mean him and Nog too. I didn't consider either of them.
Yeah, Nog's not a main cast anyway, so he won't be on my list. But I was wondering about Sirach's contract for that. Like, was he paid per episode appearance, or because he's a main cast member, does he get paid for every single episode?
I don't know. His name's in the credits, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the credits. So does that mean you? I don't know how the contracts worked back then or anything like that, but
yeah, no idea.
So, would you have anyone different in your bottom 3, or what you would consider to be your bottom 3?
If I'm going by actors, my bottom 3 are the Daxes, O'Brien, and Worf. Actually,
oh, Worf, very low.
Yeah, because I think the character's great. I would put if you're going by character, I would put him a lot higher. But actor, I think Michael Dorn is serviceable at best. Like he's good. I think he benefits from learning how to play Worf over time. Because I think I went back recently and watched an episode of TNG, and it was very different.
A little bit more stiff.
Yeah. So I think the character's great. I think his performance is fine.
My middle.
I don't really think he shows a lot of range. Let's put it that way.
No, he doesn't. My middle group are Quark, Bashir, and Cisco. Are my middle trio. I think Bashir actually is probably the most interesting of those three because he actually had the most development, I think, or the most, if not development, he certainly felt like it was an intentional evolution that if even if it wasn't intentional on some level, that character changed into something that you feel 7 years later he has learned something over the course of his adventures on that station, and he feels like he's in a different place. And I think that's pretty interesting. Quark is funny. Quark, we talked about how Odo and Quark, it felt weird when they say their goodbye and what you leave behind. I feel like Quark kind of lost his way a little bit along the way. Like they kind of ran out of stuff to do with him. And how prominent is Armin Shimmerman in the Buffy series, which he was doing at the same time as this? Do you like? Is he a major?
He was only in it for 2 seasons. So let's see. Buffy started in 97. I think.
So it's the last 2 years of DS9.
Okay. Yeah. So then he was. I would say he was a recurring guest star in seasons 2 and 3.
Okay.
So 98 and 99, roughly.
Just a handful of episodes a season or something like that?
Yeah, he played the principal of the high school, so I would say he was in maybe like a quarter of the episodes.
Oh, okay. I feel like when I read that he was on Buffy at the same time, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense that he's not as involved in DS9 in a lot of ways at this point, but it kind of speaks to the general sense that we always talked about, how the characters seem like they fell off a little bit of a ways there. Do you think that any of those performances on your list knocked them up a little bit for you? Are they higher than that, or are those all kind of your middle class people?
My middle 3 of performances are Bashir, Quark, and Kira.
Oh, okay.
Because I think Bashir, performance-wise, I think he kind of he's good, but he doesn't really. I think the character changes a lot, but I don't think his performance really, stands out that much.
No, he doesn't get much better as an actor, really, which is an interesting criticism of an actor because he plays the character totally different, but I still see the weaknesses in his performance a lot of the time. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Kira has more to do. Like her range is a lot different and a lot more interesting. And I think she gets better as an actress, as a performance as the series goes on. But I top out that section with Quark because he's just money every time he's on screen. Yeah.
That's that leaves us in an interesting place because you obviously have Avery Brooks highly rated on yours.
I do. Yeah, I have him as number 2 for my actors.
Wow.
I think, yeah.
him shoulder blocking Ducat off the ledge really change things for you.
Well, I think what he's doing is interesting. It's and
where does he rank on your captains list of the 3 so far?
He's probably number 3.
Yeah, that's my problem with him. Really, he's my number 3 as well.
Yeah, he's good. I think he does interesting stuff. I applaud him for the chances that he takes. Whether or not they are the best choice, I don't know. But he definitely brings a different feeling to a show like this, where he's not trying to be Captain Picard, he's not trying to be Captain Kirk. He's really trying to do his own thing.
Yeah,
and I appreciate it.
My top 3 characters, just in terms of character, I think are Worf, Kira, and Odo is number 1. If I had to pick some character that defined DS9, I think I'd go with Odo as a character.
Yeah. If I was picking characters over performances, my top 3 would be the same.
Oh, it'd be Worf, Kira, and Odo.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that Kira and Odo, despite the fact that they took a season and a half worth of character assassination, really, like not even character assassination, basically that they were just shuffled off the board for a long period of time. They still, to me, sum up the series really strongly, because it's interesting to me that the top 2 characters for me of this series are not Starfleet characters. They're the Bajoran characters who stick out for me. And Worf, I think, just as a characterization, we've mentioned before, Worf on DS9 just makes much more sense than he does on TNG a lot of the time. And the writers understand him better. I think that his arc is really, really clean, except for the Dax thing, which isn't really his fault as a character. I don't think there was a good way to really save Worf from what happened with the Dax changing. But I I think the way he ends is great. I think the way he came on is great. I think he's such a great outsider character for the show to bring in the fourth season, and he fits in really well. I think the fourth season is the best season of the show, largely because he freshens things up right in the middle of the series by coming onto it. And yeah, I think he's really strong. I like Dorn as Worf, I guess would be the way to say it. And I think that those three are just the best example of like thematically what the series was kind of all about. And Sisko is just on the periphery of those three. He's just outside of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Worf is he's such a great addition to the show and really does step it up a little bit. And I wonder, is that, do you feel, because O'Brien's already there, but he's kind of like an acquaintance more than a friend, to who? Whereas Worf, just to the audience.
Oh, okay, sure.
Whereas Worf is very much a close friend. Do you think that adding Worf makes the show that much more relatable?
I think so. Well, if you view it as he doesn't really replace O'Brien. But I think fundamentally the problem with O'Brien is that O'Brien doesn't really have a personality that melds with he doesn't really have a personality that contrasts with the rest of the cast, right? Because he's just a mellow guy who occasionally has a temper. But the O'Brien mistake they made was that they tried to make his family his focal point. And the family was so bad that when that fails, it's tough to bring O'Brien into a scene and know what point of view, as a writer, what point of view does O'Brien have about this? He doesn't really have a point of view about anything. Worf, on the other hand, comes in very strongly with his opinion about things, and you know what Worf's stance on the thing is going to be. And that just makes for better episodes, I think, than O'Brien. Like, O'Brien doesn't have a zest to himself that really is like, oh, great, an O'Brien episode. This is what we're going to expect from it. Yeah, I would agree. Let's see here. I think that's it. And Kira, do you have any? You talked a lot about Kira on the last one, actually, but I think that Kira's my strong number 2. I think that if anyone were to argue against Kira, I would say that it would have to come in some sort of fashion about her relationship stuff was fairly uniformly awful, and I feel like they did a pretty good job of retreading her material in a way that didn't feel like it was always retreading itself, but at the same time, their desperation to get her into a relationship kind of hinted at the fact that they weren't sure what else to do with her. Would you disagree with that?
Yeah. No, that's the thing that's so strange to me is that not that your hard-nosed female character can't also want to be in a relationship, but it's like that's like the only thing that she was either fighting against the Cardassians and the history of horror perpetrated on her and her people, or she was like in a weird romance plot.
Yeah.
And it's
with
really strange.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing, I guess, if a result of her life, the life that she's led up to this point is that she has like terrible taste in men, I guess. I don't know.
No, but you know what the most shocking thing...
It's never played that way. It's not like, it's never, any time that they put her in a relationship, it was never her like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know if this is the right thing. I'm trying really hard, but I feel like I'm doing the wrong thing, and I think he might like me more than I like him. It was never anything like that. It was just, no, she's in love with some schlub.
No, they're her... The way that, like, the only way that I can... If you're going to make Kira's taste in men this, like, cardboard, boring-ass character thing, you have to comment on the fact that it seems like subconsciously she's trying to escape her past, right?
Yes,
She's trying to settle down with someone who is not anything like what her war experience was. She wants to leave that part of her life behind. The show never comments on this. It just sticks her in a relationship and is like, yeah, she likes boring men. What are you going to do about it? That's just the way she is.
They also have a couple instances where they could have explored that, like when she's involved with Chakar. Chakar is a direct line to that past.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't work, then there could be story elements there of it was just she is trying to get away from that, but Chakar is a direct component of that past. So obviously that's not going to work for all sorts of fun reasons. And then I don't know, Bareil is just boring, I guess.
There's no Brile episode where he's got an acoustic guitar and he's just saying, "Work here, another war is over," or something like that. It's just never really pushing in that direction.
It's like not to use another Buffy allusion, but in season 3 of Buffy, she and Angel are hot and heavy or whatever, and then in season 4. Angel leaves and she gets like a normal ass boyfriend. And then when Angel comes back, he's like, "So this guy, huh?" And she's like, "Yeah, he's boring. He's nice. It's great." And like they don't ever do that where it's like she goes for the boring guy because he's the counterpoint to the raucous, crazy life she lives or anything like that. And they don't do anything with it. It's just her, being lovey-dovey with some jackass, and so Odo can be jealous of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's honestly one of the worst parts of that story. It's not even that they get them together. It's that it's not that Odo and Kira eventually get together, because that is kind of shitty as well. But it's that all of Kira's relationships seem to be in service of Odo more than they are in service of her.
To make him jealous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is really, unfortunate and tends to be a byproduct of guys writing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, Kira is neutered by her relationships in a really kind of frustrating way that defies what the character is supposed to be. And as you're saying, a lot of the time it's just Odo reacting to news of her being in a relationship. That's supposed to be like the main interesting emotional aspect of those stories, and it never really works out.
Yeah, like imagine if there was a couple scenes where she was talking to Dax and Dax was just like, "Yeah, you're not very good at this." And she's like, "I don't know why. I'm just trying to be in a relationship with a nice person, but I'm terrible at it."
Yeah.
Also, Armin Sherman was in 19 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer across 2 seasons. They were 22 episode seasons, so he was in about half of the seasons.
Oh, yeah, okay. So he's in about half of 2 seasons. So a season's worth of episodes.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, that's a decent amount. He's got to strip off his Quark mask and do the makeup chair and everything. That's a lot of shuffling back and forth between those things. Jeez. So I guess we'll wrap up with our top 3 episodes, and then we can go into. I do want to end on some positives, and then we'll briefly touch on the positives of DS9 because I do think that there are a lot. Top 3 episodes. I'll go first for you. Rocks and Shoals, Duet, and The Visitor are my top 3. Sure. This was actually, I don't know how much time you spent on this. I spent a decent amount of the past day thinking about this because I had a hard time whittling down what my top 3 are. And it's not because it didn't feel like they were all obvious choices to me. I felt like I could have argued or picked a lot of different selections, but those are the 3 that I went with: The Visitor, Duet, and Rocks and Shoals. So what are your 3?
Well, when I saw that was one of the questions, I thought it was funny that you vastly overestimated my ability to remember these episodes.
I know. That's. I was considering sending you the link to Wikipedia, the episode list, or something to refresh you.
But when I was thinking about it, and the few that I could remember that really stood out to me were obviously Duet, which is really the first one that stood out to me. I actually really loved Tacking Into the Wind. I think that was like, I think, my favorite episode from the past 2 seasons or so.
Oh, really? Interesting. Even over Pale Moonlight and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just thought it was like, it seemed like it was the serialized concept of the show just firing on all cylinders.
Gotcha.
And I think it's the best version of that concept that they've managed to do. And for, like, honestly, that was as far as I could remember. But Rocks and Shoals would be up there. I remembered Pale Moonlight. I didn't want to pick that one because it was so close to the other one.
Yep.
But that's a good one. I would say probably Rocks and Shoals would be number 3, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, your other one, there's the second Inter Arma Enim Silent Legas was the other one that you gave a 5 later on. The popular choices are the ones where Far Beyond the Stars, where he goes back and you meet Benny Russell for the first time.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I would put that in my top 3.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I don't think I would either. But it's interesting. I really like The Visitor and stuff like that. Duet obviously is like the sort of interestingly early pinnacle of the series, or like a gem from that. And Rocks and Shoals, I think, is the best wartime story that they told across everything. Yeah, that's it. I'll be doing the 30 days of DS9 as we continue on, starting in the next couple days anyway, since this thing posts. You guys can follow me on the Instagram and the Twitter if you're interested in seeing others.
What is this going to consist of?
It's just an image and me typing a little blurb about what my choice is. So it's like best quote, best episode of season 7, blah, 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 stuff like that.
Sure.
Let's see here. So let's talk about the positives, Clay. What are the positives of this series? Why should someone watch this show over TNG? What did it do well?
On Netflix, you can skip the intro, and it's like 40 minutes.
Did you even watch the finale intro, or did you skip that one too?
I think I skipped it. I can't remember. Is it different? Do they change it?
No, I intentionally watched it. I do skip them every once in a while, but I intentionally watched that one just because I was like, oh, it's the end. I have to watch the entire thing.
Yeah. I honestly can't remember. It depends on how much time I had to watch the episode.
Sometimes I want to hear the song, and sometimes I don't feel the need to do it. Yeah.
I think positives. I think it's it's a great companion to the other Star Trek series that had been out at this point. Honestly, it still is. The characters are really well drawn for the most part. It really opens up the universe in a way that the other ones don't.
Can't watch it as your first Star Trek. Can you? Or do you think it would work?
I don't know, actually. Probably not. Yeah, I guess it does. It is so reliant on specifically TNG more than anything else that you probably have to have some sort of working knowledge of TNG.
Maybe I'm sort of transplanting my feelings towards this franchise and everything, which makes it sound very overly dramatic or whatever. But as you mentioned, I'm sort of more in the reads with this series and this franchise and everything like that. Like, I know the stupid little details that you don't really need to know and everything like that. But I feel that on some emotional level, I connect with DS9, and I've been thinking about DS9 finishing in a way that I didn't think about TNG when it wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that means it's a better series or anything, but I just feel that I feel like the DS9 characters are characters that stick with me more than the TNG cast does. And that might be a strength of cast thing, and it might just be the sort of stories that DS9 has given us about these guys. But like, I feel when the TNG cast breaks up at the end of Nemesis, it doesn't feel anything like the sort of bittersweet sense that I get from the finale of DS9 when all the characters go their separate ways.
Sure.
And that's really my main takeaway, I think, is that I feel lived in with DS9 in a way that TNG maybe intentionally doesn't, and it's sort of the way that it's set up doesn't really allow you to. But the DS9 family and the DS9 cast members really feel like something, which is why I was always beating my head against the wall when they stopped writing sort of ensemble scenes with the entire cast later on in the series, and I thought that was a big mistake. They obviously had story they wanted to get through, but that's pretty much it. I ended this series thinking about it more than I ever thought about TNG, and just over the past couple of days of like trying to think about what the series meant and everything like that, I feel like I understand it on a deeper level, and I think that what they talked about was more important than what TNG talks about, even if they screw up more than TNG did. So it's this really interesting complex, and I guess this is a long way of just saying that I'd have a hard time saying that DS9 is a superior series to TNG, but I can understand making that argument at the same time because of how it sits with you.
Well, as I said in the last episode, I think Kira is my favorite Star Trek character, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because Deep Space Nine fleshes out these characters in a way that TNG never did. And yeah, I think TNG. When I think about TNG, I think about the archetype of the characters more than I do the changes that they went through, and that's obviously by design. But I think when you say the breaking up of the cast is not as effective in Nemesis, I also think that's because the kind of stories that they tell are not meant to end. Whereas in Deep Space Nine, you've got stories that are being told that ultimately have endpoints, that you have characters go through growth and change, and then eventually they split up. Everybody comes to Deep Space Nine because they're looking for something. Everybody leaves Deep Space Nine because they found it in some way or another.
Yeah.
Which is why Nemesis doesn't really work, but All Good Things does, because the touching element of All Good Things is that they, no matter how much things change around them, these characters will remain together and they will be out there searching the stars, et cetera, you know?
Yep.
Them finding something and then ultimately leaving the show isn't really what it's about.
Right. Yeah. And DS9's journey has been different from that. As you say, the people have found something and now it's time for them to move on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. I enjoyed it. I'm glad we watched the series. Glad I got it all the way through. There were definitely episodes of the series that I hadn't seen before, which was interesting in contrast to TNG, where I had seen everything.
Yeah, me too.
So it's nice to get a fresh sense on that and to not have missed anything and to get a solid through line of everything that went on. I enjoyed it. I thought it's a really good series. It's interesting. The way that it approaches the Star Trek universe is really kind of fascinating and very thoughtful, I think. Ira Bear had a quote about DS9 being the most human of all the Star Treks, and I think he's right about that.
Did he say it? Did he say it like Kirk when he was like, of all the Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine was the most human?
I can't imagine any other way that he should have said that if he didn't. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and not without its faults, but it's an interesting Star Trek series and probably the an evolution of the original idea, which is interesting enough, and all those things. That's it. We're done with DS9, I guess. Any final words for DS9?
Thank God. No,
I know.
No, yeah, I'm really glad I watched it. So not to go out on I don't know if this would be a downer, but as a final thought about the contrast between the two of them, do you think you will go back to Deep Space Nine more or less often than you would go back to TNG at this point?
Less often.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't think that's just a matter of the design of the show.
Yeah.
Where it's difficult to dip in on the 5th episode of the 10-episode Dominion War, Yeah,
no, I mean,
and it's not the warm hug that TNG is ultimately,
No, it's not.
And I think it's better for that. I think it is. I think it's better for that they did something different and they succeeded at it.
Hey, everybody, I forgot to talk about the patron comments for this one. You step away, you finish DS9, and it's like you never podcasted about it before. But I did ask our patrons, as usual, what they thought about the series as a wrap-up, so I'm just going to insert them right here. I'm going to start with Kyle Barrett, who said, "Show good." Very good comment from Kyle. Moving on, Neil Brennan says, "Grown-up Star Trek. Fuck yeah. The highest highs of any Trek I've watched so far. With the Ferengi episodes, maybe the lowest lows. Just kidding. TNG characters can only dream of the depth most of the DS9 crew achieved. So hard not to view it and wonder what a 2010s version, cutting out a lot of the shit of 1990s network TV, would look like. Strikes me it had the biggest bag of great ideas of any Trek show, even if they weren't all capitalized on. Weyoun, Garrick, and Gul Dukat are all timers, not to mention my captain for life, Benjamin Sisko. I think I've described the plot of one TNG episode to my wife in a "isn't this cool" way. I've told her about Duet, Pale Moonlight, The Visitor, Far Beyond the Stars, and Move Along Home. Captain Quark says, DS9 is my favorite Star Trek series to date, but a curated watch list is definitely recommended. The show is at its best when it deals with the Dominion, the Cardassians, and the Klingons, but you can skip a significant chunk of the other episodes. Duet, The Visitor, and Children of Time are my recommended must-see one-shot episodes. The station occupation arc in Season 6 is the series' high point. The show grew frustrating after that arc since, with some notable exceptions like In the Pale Moonlight and Treachery, Faith, and the Great River, many of the following episodes are either unmemorable, low quality, or both. Fortunately, the final chapter of Season 7 mostly brought everything back into focus. In retrospect, I would have wrapped up the show with a tighter sixth season that finished the Dominion War and concluded both the Emissary and Dukat storylines in Sacrifice of Angels. That's a pretty early time to finish the war, actually. I don't know what they would talk about for the rest of it. Zam Nuclear Wessel writes, the galactic politics are definitely what drew me into DS9, along with the new viewpoint in which many scenes have no humans or even Federation citizens present. But it's the characters that make it a pleasure to revisit the show, even the lesser episodes. The other Treks had great characters too, but the relationships between the Niners are very dynamic and interesting. Dwayne Hackett says, DS9 is by far my favorite Trek series. Even 20 years after its final episode, DS9 is still the best Star Trek series to me. It has the most consistent character development mixed with various forms of intrigue and daring, which pushed Star Trek as a whole into unknown territory. DS9 did all of this while navigating the risky waters of 90s TV, which is why it remains the most culturally relevant out of all of the series. Vault 13 Hero says, well, it started fairly rocky, as all Treks in the 80s and 90s did. It truly was the best Star Trek series story-wise. Adding Worf to the mix was great. I don't think the Klingon storylines would have been anywhere near as good if he wasn't on DS9. Weirdly enough, I think my favorite characters on the show are Quark, Rom, and Nog. No one can deny that the Ferengi-centric episodes were awful, but when they were allowed to just support the main story, I think it was great TV. Fantastic series. Matt Ross says, from some of the worst stories, Melora, Meridian, Let He Who Is Without Sin, most Ferengi episodes, to some of the best character development, emotion, and serial storytelling, DS9 allowed us to experience it all. What made this stand apart are those interconnected serializations and the fact that not everyone was the best in their positions. The idealism of the Federation quickly became tarnished, if not outrightly broken, aka Section 31. Not everywhere is paradise. People aren't all taken in by the amoeba of the Federation. It was fun and filled in a lot of the gaps of what the other non-Starship crews were doing, and had characters that made you want to get to know them, except Keiko. She's obviously mean. Not every story was well executed, but the Dominion arc, the Klingon War, and the character interactions, for the most part, carried us through, making it one of the best, if not the best, Star Trek series. Alan Moraine. Christian Pouch says, each of the big three Trek series has a particular place in my heart. I watched TNG when I was first getting into Trek as a wee lad, and feels like comfort food. Voyager is the series I followed all the way through as I was older and my siblings and I could track it independent of my parents' interest. I actually missed a lot of DS9 on its first run-through, but it's my favorite in terms of the highs in storytelling and character building, and it's my preferred view of the Trek universe. It's not perfect, not by a long shot, but it does some amazing work that is really satisfying to watch. It's not just moralizing at you. It's not just trying to hammer a point. It's an examination and discussion, and I think that's a very mature and nuanced take on Star Trek. Kyle Barrett came back after his night of drinking and leaving his first comment. He says, Garrick. I'm all about Garrick. This last rewatch has cemented him as my favorite supporting character across all Star Trek, although the show forgets him a few times over the series, most notably towards the end before he makes a triumphant return in the final arc. He has a great character journey, and Andrew Robinson is a wonderful performer. And the episode The Wire ranks among my very favorite of the series. Lastly, Yarpy says, first thought that comes to mind with DS9 is inconsistency, and I probably rated the last arc too high. I think one of the problems with DS9 might be too many writers. On this time around, I was a bit surprised how poorly the last arc was paced, especially compared to certain other sci-fi shows set on a space station as well. Another surprising thing was that this supporting cast was stronger than the regular cast, such as Damar and Garrick, when you look at the whole show, and of course, Weyoun. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts. Thank you for supporting the series, and that's it. All right, back to the show. Yeah, I mean, Rocks and Shoals I have as a top 3 episode, right? Rocks and Shoals is tough to drop into without the build-up being there for it. Right. And I think they do have episodes that stand alone, like Duet and The Visitor, I think do stand on their own and everything like that. But it is tough to... Because the irony there is, as much as I'm talking about like the cast and the family of DS9 feeling like something, it feels like it's a harder family to just drop into on a moment's notice, and to like pick the right episode where everyone is just kind of there and doing things. There's not a lot of episodes that are like that. It's more the sense of family and the sense of like being in the show comes across much more strongly from just watching a lot of the episodes in a row than it is from picking anyone in particular, in the way that TNG is. I feel like 80% of TNG episodes you could kind of pick and get a good sense of the entire cast is there with you doing things. And DS9 doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, you can't you can't drop in on an episode of Deep Space Nine just because you want to see like some good Kira stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like the way that you would drop in on TNG just to see, oh, I love Riker. I love what Riker does. It's like, yeah, Riker does kind of the same shit in every episode. So you're going to see it, that a version of that's going to make you go, oh, that's why I love Riker. If you just drop in on a random episode of Deep Space Nine and it's Kira off with her boyfriend not doing anything.
Yeah,
you know?
and Odo masturbating in the corner or something. You're just like, this is not what I did not sign up for this. This is not what I want.
Yeah, it's interesting how it shakes out that way.
I mean, I mentioned it. TNG really is the idealized family, and DS9 is your real family. There's like misery in your real family, you know. And you run into it. And TNG is like this perfect little 1950s white picket fence version of what that working relationship would be. Yeah,
you know, I think when you picture the two series too, right? It's TNG is much brighter,
more pleasant to watch.
Yeah, the uniforms are a lot brighter, and I think it's such a great choice that they made in Deep Space Nine to immediately make the uniforms darker. Mm-hmm. It just changes the atmosphere of the show, and then they go even a step further and make them even darker than they were at the beginning of the show.
And militarized. They militarized themselves over the course of it, yeah.
Yeah, and it really does add a different layer to the show that I think works so much better. Like, could you imagine the shit that happens in the Dominion War arc if everybody was wearing like TNG era uniforms?
Season 1, you like tight onesies.
Yeah, it would feel weird, right?
Yeah, it would.
Seeing Cisco sitting behind that desk wearing that bright or darkish red tunic.
Yes,
and talking about sending Worf off to murder Gowron because he won't. Because he's screwing up the Klingon offensive protocol or whatever.
It's true. No, and I think that it's a shame that the series will never get remastered fully, because I think that something that we probably should have commented more on, but we didn't, just because you can't see it, is the station itself. I think aesthetically is really... Like they do it because it's supposed to be Cardassian architecture, but it's an angry design that they built into the station. Like the station does not look very friendly. It doesn't have the wall-to-wall carpeting of TNG and things like that. Mm-hmm. And in standard definition, you can't really see it that well because they're intentionally low lighting it, and it's not brightly lit like TNG, but it's something that everything's so angular and jagged in the production design of Deep Space Nine in a way that suits the material and sort of puts you into the mindset of that discomfort that a lot of the characters are in.
I don't find that it has the same design. I don't think the design stands out the way that the stuff on TNG does, or even the original series. Like Deep Space Nine doesn't really have a bridge. They have that like comms area.
Yeah, ops. They abandon ops too. They don't shoot in ops a lot. Yeah,
they've got ops, but it's not like I don't have a picture of what ops looks like in my head the way I do the bridge of the Enterprise. Or I don't have a picture. I mean, I kind of have a picture of what the promenade looks like, but even there, it's like it's very dark. It's not brightly colored. Or I'm not saying it should be, but it's a different. It makes the atmosphere different, not having in a Star Trek show these very identifiable sets and landmarks.
Yes,
they are identifiable, but just not in the same way.
What's the set that defines DS9 for you?
For me, the giant gear door that rolls open. That's the only design element that stands out to me. Like it's the weirdest thing, and it's the place where everybody comes in, and they made this really, instead of just another door that opens, they turned it into this giant wheel that like rolls away from the front of the entranceway.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I think of when I think of Deep Space Nine.
I think of there's a lot of, like, you could think of the Promenade, you could think of Quark's.
Quark's would probably number 2 for me.
Yeah, you could think of Cisco's office. I tend to think of the design of their rooms, like their personal spaces, for some reason. I don't know why. It's very dark. It's always very unpleasant in all of those rooms in a way that TNG wasn't. But that's something that comes to my mind for some reason. Quark's would probably be number 2. Even if I feel like 10 Forward better suited the bar idea than Quark's did somehow. Mm-hmm. I don't really know why, but that just seems to be the case for me, that I think of 10 Forward as like a better use of that kind of setting than Quark's ever was.
Yeah. I always thought Quark's was oddly designed because I couldn't place exactly where in the station it was.
Yep.
Because there's no real, you don't get a good sense of where the entrance is and stuff. It just sort of is there, and it's kind of open concept a little bit.
Yep. Just on the promenade, I guess. It's just one of the shops that's out there. Yeah. All right. I guess we're done with this one. DS9 is over. Thank you guys very much for listening. I think our next podcast is going to be about the documentary, and then we'll do a movie, and then it's Picard. Maybe we'll try to get all the movies done, but we'll see what the state of the union is at that point. But it'll definitely be the documentary next. So you guys can get ready for that. It's called What We Left Behind, I think. That's it. Clay, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for listening to me fumble my way through Deep Space Nine for the first time. I hope I didn't offend too many people in my ignorance.
Yeah, no, it was good. It's tough because we just finished it, but you certainly have to think about it, I guess, for a little bit or something. But maybe it's just the nature of how often I do this that I tend to think about stuff like that. But it's been fun to do. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Best way to do that is patreon.com/the Pensky File. A couple $2 a month and you get extra stuff. Otherwise, social media down below, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. You can follow me on those for the 30 days of DS9, which I'll be doing. I think that's pretty much it. We'll be back with the documentary after this, which is good. I like the documentary, but Clay hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
We'll see their idea for how Season 8 would have started if there was a Season 8. And then we'll talk about Avery Brooks not being present. We'll talk about Marco Lamo's fashion sense. We'll talk about Ira Stephen Bear's fashion sense, I suppose, and we'll take it from there.
They don't talk to Cisco on the documentary?
He refused to do interviews for the documentary.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
He said all that he needs to say, and he doesn't want to say anymore.
But he still does conventions and shit.
I guess. I don't know if he does conventions, and he certainly was doing them. I don't know if he's completely abandoned that at this point. I'm torn about it because while I understand not wanting to do things like that, I think there's a certain level of responsibility that you should think about for other people who enjoyed it, I guess. And
yeah,
it's not like they're not doing like a what's that before Boyhood? What's that movie with Linklater or what is it? Where they filmed them for 10 years or something? Like they're just going to interview you for 4 hours and then be done with it. And I think you could.
I know.
Yeah.
You would think if anything, the pitch would be okay. That's fine, but like, what if this is the last thing to say?
Right. This is your final statement right here. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's disappointing, but I don't think the documentary really suffers from it. But it is unfortunate
and it's
that
not
they
even
didn't want to do it.
It's not even like the Blu-ray set for The Prisoner has a big making of documentary on The Prisoner where they talk to pretty much everybody who is still alive except Patrick McGowan, because and at the beginning of the documentary there is a written statement from him that says essentially what Avery Brooks said. That I feel is different because there is so much stuff that people have been asking him for 50 years or whatever at that point, that he has answered the same questions about the same plot points and the same, mysteries and stuff over and over and over again. And the show itself serves as its own statement. So I can understand him not wanting to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
It's not like, I'm sure he gets asked about it a lot, but why not go on record? I don't know. That seems silly to me.
No, I think it's a pretty silly thing to do. I just think you I think it's like an ethical thing. You just have to weigh what is 4 hours of your time versus making potentially, I don't know how many people watch the documentary, but say it's like 1 million people who watch it and improving that for them. Like there's a certain trade-off. Like it's like, yeah, just answer the Star Trek questions. It's what everyone knows you for. Like
he did that friggin' Captain's documentary with Shatner, but he won't do this.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Well, we won't get too down on the documentary before we start.
Maybe he said, I'll do it, but only if I can play the piano and sing while I do it. And they were like, no, man, come on.
Avery was tickling the ivory so aggressively that the audio is ruined and we can't hear anything he had to say, so we're going to cut him out. We'll be back with the Blu-ray, the documentary, What We Left Behind, in a couple days. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Thank you for listening to our coverage of DS9. Thank you for listening in general, and I guess we'll see you later. Thanks.